Hello, and welcome to a special edition of Up Close on METV. I'm Charles Clapsaddle, Station Manager for Manatee Educational Television, and it's our pleasure to have with us again today Congressman Vern Buchanan. Congressman, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us. It's been our privilege over the past few years to get congressional updates from you from time to time, and we always welcome the opportunity to chat with you.
Charles, it's great seeing you, and I want to thank you for what you do and your organization does for the community in terms of keeping people informed. I appreciate your effort.
Well, your many efforts, outreach to the community, the town halls and the speaking tours that you do, always try to keep this community involved, engaged, and knowledgeable about the great things that you're doing in Congress. But one of the things that really comes to mind, and I want you to take a few minutes if you can, is to talk about the Sarasota National Cemetery. You know, the Patterson Foundation is working hand in hand with the Veterans Administration on developing a Patriot Plaza and a whole Legacy of Valor effort. Why is that so important to this community? And tell us some things about your efforts on their behalf.
Well, again, in just Sarasota, Manatee County, we have 90,000 veterans and their families. The cemetery will support, in this region, let's say, close to 400,000 families. So it's a huge thing in this effort. I was there the other day touring it. 7,000 burials or services have been held already in terms of our veterans and family members. So we're pretty much done. We're good for 10 years. It was another 50,000. We were able to help them get that. But the other aspect that's going to make it so special and unique in the country for our veterans is what you're talking about, the Patterson Pavilion. They originally committed $6 million. I talking the other day, it looks like it could be over $10 million. It's going to be a world-class pavilion to do events in terms of recognizing and supporting our veterans, in terms of Memorial Day, Veterans Days, all kinds of concerts in conjunction with the Veterans Administration. And they've never done it before. Right. This will be the first in the country, and I think it could be a pattern where it could be rolled out for a lot of other national veterans cemeteries across the country. But I can tell you, in talking to veterans, are very excited about the possibilities.
It's a wonderful opportunity. Both Sarasota and Manatee County are fully supportive of the efforts of the Patterson Foundation. I think it's a 2,500-seat arena amphitheater that they're building, which is going to be free and open to the public for any events that they want to hold there. And I think it's a tremendous asset for this community.
Yeah, well, the Patterson Foundation, you're right, and I think it'll seat about 1,500. You can add another 1,000 chairs under a real nice facility. Right. They're bringing in some fabulous art. But I think one of the big things that people are very excited about, too, is the fact that the government's not going to have to maintain this going forward. They've set up an endowment to take care of all the maintenance forever in terms of this facility. But I think it's going to be spectacular for our region, first of its kind, and I think it's going to be a great opportunity to spread this across the country, again, to recognize the commitments that our veterans have paid, many times paid the price for our country.
We've been always supportive of veterans and veteran issues, and so perhaps next time you come back we can get an update on where the status of it is and how the Patriot Plaza is coming along. But Congressman, one of your top priorities, and has been your top priority for many years, has always been the jobs and the economy. We know the economy is showing signs of improvement. There's, new hires, foreclosures aren't as high as they used to be, but there's still a lot of people that are unemployed. What do you see as the next steps here and how to grow that economy?
Well, again, you said underemployed and unemployed. There is a lot of that where people used to make X, they're working, but they're making less. That's still my number one priority, should be the country's number one priority. We need to get everybody that wants a job. It wasn't that many years ago in Manatee County, you couldn't find workers. We had a 2.9% unemployment rate. So I've got a jobs bills that I've introduced, and we're going to continue to push. But at the end of the day, it's about helping small businesses be more successful. We're trying to do something on tax reform. I'm actually heading up that committee nationally to help them do their taxes, and also look for a format if we can't go with a flatter, simpler, fairer tax for them. But the more we can help our small business people, the more we can help with entrepreneurship and startups, that's where most of the jobs are created. You know, Manatee Chamber. They've got 2,000 businesses in that chamber. 93%, I heard the other day or something, have 15, 20 employees or less.
Exactly.
What more can we do to help them be more successful, because they're the job creators?
Well, recently the chamber has, initiated a lot of steps. They're recognized again this year for their efforts on behalf of all their memberships. But one of the things that we can talk about a little bit is that there's a lot of bright spots that are happening. And one of those great bright spots we've just had the opportunity to talk to is Feld Entertainment coming to Manatee County. Large multinational corporation located right here in Manatee County. That's going to be a huge step in the right direction.
Well, I toured it the other day, maybe about a month ago. Very impressive. They bought up the facility. They've added, I think, $10 or $20 million they're putting in that facility. They're looking at, we talked about this earlier, a couple hundred good paying jobs.
Exactly.
And they're one of the largest entertainment facilities companies in the country. So I'm very excited about it. The owners moved down here, or at least spending more of his time down in this region. They're very committed to Palmetto, Manatee County.
Correct.
And I'm going to do everything we can to help them be more successful. And but it started out as just doing circus acts and other things. Now they're into monster trucks and everything else.
Right.
And it was like 100 yards, 3 football fields or whatever, 2 or 3 football fields of just costumes and stuff there the other day. And then looking at all the monster trucks. But the bottom line is, this is their staging. This is going to be their headquarters.
Exactly. It's
going to be a huge asset for this community in terms of good paying jobs.
And the other, really large impact that's going to be made is, of course, the Benderson Rowing Facility. Recently, representatives of both Sarasota and Manatee County are now in Switzerland making their proposal to the rowing powers that be. So that's going to be another large impact for this community. And tell us a little bit about why that's important.
Well, again, it's going to attract people from all over the world, all over the country. They're up there trying to get the World Games. We would be ideally the venue for the United States in rowing. I mean, a lot of the Ivy Leagues, I think Harvard is on the river here in the Manatee River. But it just brings a lot of people, a lot of families. They buy go in our restaurants here locally. They go into our hotels. There'll be more hotels put up. And what that does is just create more jobs for young people or people in general in our community. It'll be huge. It's going to be, originally I knew it'd be pretty good size, but now I think the impact will be into the billions or hundreds of millions of dollars over a longer period of time. But it'll be a big, it sits right on the border of Sarasota, Manatee County, so both counties are going to participate in a very big way with that. And then that backs right up to a mall that's 800,000 square feet or 1 million square feet, something like that. And it's going to create probably 2,000 jobs. I heard possibly there up to 2,000 jobs. So that's another great opportunity. That's online. That's being constructed and built and on time. So that whole area there is going to be a huge opportunity for this region.
Well, I think it'll really transform that whole area, completely, and it's going to become like really a destination place. But aside from your efforts and your concern and your focus on creating jobs and helping the economy, your other priority is to be reducing spending. Now, how do you propose that we get spending under control? Because that's a major effort right now, both in Congress and with the administration, to find out where that spending has to be curtailed.
Well, again, when I got in Congress, got voted in, and had the opportunity to serve, that was in 2007. We were running $8 trillion and change. Today, I think we just passed $17 trillion. At some point, if we don't deal with the spending, the debt, and the deficit, all this ends badly for everybody. I mean, we can talk about all these other issues, but the most important issue, and the reason I really ran, is because I'm very concerned about the debt and the deficits and what we're going to leave our children. Every generation's done better. I feel we're putting the next generation at risk if we don't get it under control. That's why the first week I got there in 2007, January, we introduced a constitutional balanced budget amendment, Buchanan balanced budget amendment, that simply says you don't spend more and you take in. If you look at the state, for example, they've had less revenues. This year they're up, but over the last 3 or 4 years, families have, small businesses had. They've made the adjustments. The federal government hasn't. It's a little better this year. It's not because we don't have the revenues. Our revenues are a record amount in terms of taxpayers are sending to Washington, but we still continue to spend $700–800 billion more than we have. And at some point, it's like putting all the expenses on the credit cards. The kids or someone's got to be able to pay that, and they'll never be able to pay it back. So I'm going to continue to push that we get a constitutional balanced budget amendment.
Right.
It's not just Republicans, it's Democrats and Republicans. So if you go back over the last 50 years, they've only balanced the budget 5 or 6 times. So they're both to blame. But we did get a bill like mine on the floor. We came up a little bit short in terms of passing that in the House, but I'm going to continue to work for that.
Well, one of your other major concerns throughout your political history is always your promises to veterans and seniors, and you want to keep those in mind. How do you protect those veterans and seniors?
Well, we've made a commitment in terms of Social Security and Medicare and our veterans that have served. I'm going to do everything we can to fight to make sure that makes sense long term. However, we need to make sure that they're viable programs. Medicare and Social Security are 2 great programs, and we've got to make sure they're not just there for our current seniors, but also for future seniors in the future. We got 10,000 to 12,000 people a day turning 65 for the next 30 years.
Right.
And so we've got to make sure that those benefits are there. They've paid into them. They're their benefits, and I'm going to do everything we can to secure those benefits.
And that's going to be a tough road ahead.
Yeah, well, it'll be a challenge, and we'll need some tweaks and adjustments, no question about it, but we've got to do that on a bipartisan basis, which I might add, I'm actually chairing the Florida delegation, Democrats and Republicans, but that's something we can work together on to make sure that we do the right thing, not just for current seniors, but for future seniors.
Now, Congressman, one of the key issues that's going to face you when you go back into session is the Senate just passed the comprehensive immigration reform bill. Now, that's coming before the House is now considering immigration reform, which is, a lot of people have said, has been long overdue. There's got to be something done. You have been consistently against any kind of amnesty. What's your position on the bills making their way through Congress right now? And specifically, what do you see as the turnout for immigration reform?
Well, again, I'm a representative, and the general feeling I get from all the meetings, all the input I have is people that break our laws. We're a land of laws. We shouldn't be giving people amnesty, and if anything, they should get in the back of the line. But the Senate bill, there's no appetite for that in the House. We're going to take it and break it down and look at various aspects. Right. You're right, it's been 20 or 30 years in terms of 40 years, maybe since the last immigration bill. We've got to make sure that's right. A lot of people are concerned because President Reagan, who I admired a lot, had an immigration, or not an immigration, but they gave amnesty. Right. They had 3 million people that were, undocumented, and then here we are, 20, 25 years later, with now 12 to 15 million, depends whose numbers you want to use, that are trying to get a path to citizenship or amnesty, and we want to make sure this doesn't happen again, and that's why we're going to take our time, get it right, and we're not going to do it based on politics. We're going to do it based on good public policy. But I can just tell you that's the sentiment in the House right now.
And that'll be coming up with as soon as you get back into Washington, won't it? Well, that'll be right on one of the key things that comes up?
Well, last week I spent 3 hours with fellow members and all the leaderships talking about all the various aspects. And, everybody wants the border security first, and I agree with it. But I just would add that, border security is a big part of it. But people that have visas, what they call visa overstays, 35 or 40% of the people that are here illegally or undocumented come into Disney World from Colombia, get a visa with a family, and they don't go home. That's a visa overstay, and we have no process to deal with it. And it doesn't deal with it, in my mind, effectively in terms of the Senate bill. So that's one of the big things. We want to make sure this time we get it right so that, again, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, when we have to, if we get confronted again, we don't want to have another 20 million people here illegally. Americans need to decide that. We're a land of immigrants. My grandparents were from Finland, but at the end of the day, they need to be here legally.
Well, one thing we want to take a global perspective now, and I think this is one thing that you've spoken very passionately and made a point about this, is on foreign policy, specifically about our aid to Egypt. Now, throughout the news, the Army seized control from a democratically elected president. To this day, as early as this morning, there's still riots going on. A lot of people are being killed because of this opposition. What's your position on aid to Egypt right now? Because we are consistently giving aid to Egypt.
Well, I was in Cairo, met with the leaders there, the military leaders before. I was concerned back then. We give them $2 billion a year for the last 30 years. They did a poll, Gallup poll in Egypt. 85% of the people said they don't want our money. So we can't be in the business of buying our friends. My point is, I've introduced a bill to eliminate their aid to Egypt with the idea we've got our own priorities here. Let's take our dollars, our taxpayer dollars, and use them to help Americans. And that's my attitude. But all this needs to be looked at, not just Egypt, the $2 billion, but we give out $54 billion in foreign aid. Maybe at one point we could be helpful, and we need to do some of it, but we should be able to cut that substantially, cut it in half. We need to refocus those dollars and take care of our needs here in Manatee County, the state of Florida, and the U.S. That's my opinion.
Yeah. So do you see the administration continuing to give aid to the military leaders that are now in power?
Well, they're continuing to give aid, and I'm going to continue to fight them about giving aid, because I don't think it's the right thing. We should not be buying our friends. We got our own priorities. We've got $600–700 billion deficits we're running. We're borrowing that money from the Chinese, and we're giving it to the Egyptians. I think that's wrong.
Well, we can stay on the administration for a moment, Congressman. The administration recently delayed the mandate that businesses provide health insurance to their workers or pay a fine under Obamacare, the Affordable Health Care Act. What's your feelings about that? And they've delayed it, I believe, for a year. Is that correct?
Yeah, they're delaying it for big corporations primarily, but they're not delaying it for individuals. So we're going to go up. I'll go up tomorrow or Wednesday, one of the 2 days, and we're going to address that. We think both of it needs to be pushed back. But again, I've never been a big fan of Obamacare, simply because health care costs are out of sight. I did a town hall here in Bradenton. One woman stood up. She has 4 or 5 employees. She said for her business, for her and her family alone, she's paying $2,000 a month. Healthcare costs are through the roof. Obamacare, if you look at what's happened in the last 2 or 3 years, everybody I talk to, their cost of insurance is up about 25% a year. So it does nothing to bend the curve on healthcare. It does subsidize probably 30 to 50 million people with either free or highly subsidized health care. And I think with all the other priorities we've got, there's a much better way to go.
Well, let me follow that up. Your health care is a serious issue, throughout the country, in every jurisdiction whatsoever. What do you see, of Obamacare for the next year or two? How do you see that evolving? Do you see perhaps the state of Florida expanding Medicaid? There's been a lot of talk that nobody wants that to happen.
Yeah, I'm not. I think nobody's quite sure on where all this goes. I mean, we just heard about right over the 4th of July holiday that he's introducing this, pushing it back about a year or so. So there's a lot of uncertainty. I've met with a lot of business people. There's a lot of uncertainty with them. And we need to make sure that we get it right. And I think that's what a lot of people in my party are concerned about, because again, it gets back to the big thing. Healthcare is a big problem. A lot of small businesses, I talked about the Manatee Chamber.
Right.
If you go poll them, one of their top issues, if not their top issue, is available and affordable health care. I think it's twice as much as it should be, and we've got to find a way to get all these middlemen out of the middle of it and get the cost down for small business people.
Now, Congressman, you're a member of a very powerful House Ways and Means Committee, and you have jurisdiction over the Internal Revenue Service. And you've also just participated in these hearings regarding the IRS and their targeting of certain conservative Tea Party groups. What do you feel should be done as a result of these investigations, and how serious an issue has this become?
It's a huge issue for a lot of people. I don't care if it's Tea Party or liberal groups. You can't have the IRS targeting people. They have 90,000 employees, a $12 billion budget. Our committee does have jurisdiction over it, so we are going to have a very intense, investigation. We'd like to get it out sooner than later, but we're going to get to the bottom of it and make sure, because what they're targeting, and a lot of people feel, is political enemies, and that can't happen in this country. They talked to us the other day about investing more dollars, and he said, for every dollar, Vern, that you give us, we get you back 6. I said, with your power, you can probably get back a lot more, but we don't want the intimidation and the harassment. They have a job to do. There's a lot of professionals there, but when you look at what's happened in terms of the targeting, it's very scary and alarming to a lot of members of Congress.
Well, we hope that, when you come back and for another update and congressional update, you can keep us apprised of the situation there. I think most of America was shocked and completely by the IRS targeting certain groups and denying them status.
Well, it's going to be an ongoing investigation, and we're trying to get to the bottom of it as quickly as we can. But a lot of times, you got to have some willingness on that side to be cooperative. They've been somewhat cooperative, but there's a lot of stuff that we got to go through and find out who led the effort, how far it goes up or down, and just deal with it. And it's not about politics one way or the other, but we've got to fix it, and we will.
Now, the committee, the House of Ways and Means, has also been working on tax reform as well. Can you give us a little status of where that stands and what sort of support you see for tax reform?
I think the tax code's 73,000 pages. We're trying to get it more simpler, fair, and flatter. And I can tell you, our chairman, Dave Camp, that's his #1 priority. We've had a lot of meetings. I mentioned earlier, I'm chairing the small business, medium-sized business, pass-through entities, because a lot of people that have businesses, it passes through their personal income. So we're trying to figure out a way where we can keep their taxes down, with the idea there's bank financing is still challenging. It's not what it was 5 or 6 years ago, but they need every dollar they can get to keep in their business to help them grow more jobs. So we're going to try to simplify it the best we can, and it hasn't been dealt with since 1987 in terms of tax reform. A lot has changed in the world. But my main focus is helping small businesses and try to simplify it, get it as low as we can, a flat tax ideally, and that's what we're working on every day.
Well, Congressman, we're kind of winding down here, and we have a few minutes left, but I wanted to mention the fact that you've always been very, very concerned about the efforts here in Manatee, Sarasota County. You've been involved with the port infrastructure, transportation infrastructure. You've always been kind of proactive and kind of reaching out to seeing where those issues are. You've had, the Secretary of Transportation down, a variety of different people. What do you think are those key issues that are facing Sarasota and Manatee County that you want to follow up with in the coming year?
I think the biggest thing by far is jobs. Until everybody has a job and a good paying job, I'm going to be relentless about that. I think that's the biggest thing, because it also helps them get back to work. They want to go to work, but it kicks more money in the Treasury to pay some of the bills. So I think that's the highest priority. And then I look at Port Manatee. It's the closest. I've had the ambassador here once, twice. I'm going to bring him back. But the idea is, I think there's 20,000 good paying jobs directly and indirectly. I'd like to take that, help take that to 50,000, 40,000 jobs, because I think they pay 20, 30, 40% more than a typical job in Manatee County. So anything we can do to help the port. And then we've got a lot of other projects. I mean, I look at, in terms of the region, some of the most successful home builders are in Manatee County. They're doing very good. They're having record sales. So I think that in general, the economy is moving in the right direction. I'm very bullish on Manatee and Sarasota County long term. There's a lot of people like myself that came down here 20-some years ago from Michigan and other places, and they want to call Manatee County their home. So I read the other day, Manatee and Sarasota County, the #1 place in the country for mid-sized communities that people are moving is this region.
That's right.
So I'm very, very bullish long term. I mean, if you look back in 1994, things started to pick up. We went through the early recession in the early 90s. But from 94 to 06, 12 years, we had a pretty good run. Couldn't find workers. And then we hit 2008, and it's been tough for 3 or 4 years. But we do also, what that tells me is we need more diversity in our economy. It can't just be about construction and tourism. We need to be looking at felt entertainment. We need to be looking at the rowing park. We need to be looking at Port Manatee in terms of more diversity. And they've got a pretty good team here in terms of economic development. So my goal is really to focus on helping small businesses deliver those jobs that are good paying jobs for a lot of the working families in our community.
Well, Congressman, again, very, very eloquently spoken, but I must add that you've also been a big supporter of education too, with the University of South Florida, State College, Florida, Ringling. This is a community that has great educational resources, and they in turn are turning out people that are looking for jobs and wanting great opportunities, and hopefully that'll continue to rise. And education has always been in the forefront of your plans as well.
Yeah, I think, I'm a kid that's one of six, grew up in a blue-collar family. My dad worked in the factory for 30-some years, and my mom was very hardworking. I want to do everything we can. I was the first one in my family to go to college. Education is the equalizer. We've got to make sure that we do everything from that sense. I was in Bradenton, and they're talking about the Boys and Girls Club, and 25% of the population in the country are children, but they make up 100% of the future. We've got to do everything we can to help them get the best education. It might not always be go to the University of Florida, Florida State. It might be getting a good technical degree, because you can make good money being a licensed plumber, electrician, or technician, and someday get your own business. But our job is to take care of those kids, because that is the future of America.
Well, Congressman, we would welcome you to come back, perhaps down the road, and give us an update on the great things that you're going to be doing up in Congress, and also fill us in on these tough decisions that you're going to be having to make. So, Congressman, we'll welcome you back at any time.
Charles, thank you for what you do and keeping people informed in the community. You do an outstanding job, you and your organization, and I appreciate the opportunity that we get a chance to spend some time with your viewers.
Well, it's always most informative when you come here, and we get the facts and the figures and the perspective from you who are having to sit and make these tough decisions.
Yeah, and I would just also say to your viewers, I tell people I'm humbled to be a congressman, but at the end of the day, I'm a representative, and I want your viewers to reach out to our office if there's anything we can do, because we work for them.
And we're going to put that number up on the screen, so if people do have some questions or they want to find out some more information, they can get in touch with the great staff that you have over at your offices.
And that's why we're here, to serve them.
Thank you, Congressman, for being here, and thank you for joining us on this very special edition of Up Close on METV.